Chapter 1. Invisible Among Us. On the distant planet Zifra, nestled in the outer rim of the Galactic Union's territories, the Veilari had evolved a remarkable trait over millennia-perfect invisibility. This adaptation wasn't merely a survival mechanism against predators, but a sophisticated biological art, allowing them to bend light waves around their bodies, rendering themselves entirely unseen to the naked eye. Kaylee, a young Veilari born into this world of unseen watchers, had mastered the nuances of this ability under the guidance of her community's elders. Her people valued knowledge, stealth, and the understanding of other cultures, traits that made them excellent observers and, occasionally, the most discreet of intergalactic intermediaries. Kaylee's assignment to Earth was a prestigious one, considering the planet's burgeoning status in the cosmic community. Earth was a Level 4 civilization, intriguingly poised on the cusp of interstellar travel and technological innovations that had started to draw the wider galaxy's notice. For the Galactic Union, and especially for a Veilari like Kaylee, Earth represented a crucial point of interest. Her mission was clear: to observe, to learn, and to return with insights that could help the Union understand whether humans were ready for deeper integration into galactic affairs, or if their unpredictability made them a potential threat. Arriving on Earth cloaked in her invisibility, Kaylee chose New York City as her primary observation ground. The city, a melting pot of human diversity and a hub of technological and cultural output, offered her a broad spectrum of human life and innovation to study. Skyscrapers stretched towards the sky like the steel and glass spires of a modern-day Babel, each one a testament to human ingenuity and ambition. The streets teemed with people from all walks of life, each individual a potential story, a bearer of the world's myriad truths and secrets. In her first weeks on Earth, Kaylee spent time weaving through the crowded avenues, her presence unnoticed by the rushing businessmen, the meandering tourists, and the everyday citizens. She frequented places of great knowledge and social convergence, universities bustling with young minds, corporate offices echoing with the clatter of keyboards, government buildings heavy with the weight of bureaucratic power, and technology expos showcasing the latest human innovations. The Veilari had always taught their young that to truly understand another culture, one must observe not just their achievements, but also their daily struggles, their joys, and their ordinary moments. Kaylee saw couples sharing quiet conversations in the dappled sunlight of Central Park. She heard heated debates over coffee in the cramped, buzzing cafes of Greenwich Village. She watched as children played with naive abandon on the playgrounds, their laughter a universal music. Yet, for all the wonder and the vibrant tapestry of human life, Kaylee often felt overwhelmed. Human emotions were palpable in a way that Veilari sensibilities could barely comprehend. The rawness of their joy, the depths of their sorrow, the quick spark of their anger, all were laid bare with a frankness that was both shocking and deeply moving. Her own people communicated with subtle gestures and thought, their emotional expressions muted by generations of conditioning to remain unseen, unnoticed. As her mission continued, Kaylee grew increasingly fascinated with human creativity. Art, music, literature, these were areas where the humans shined, their cultural outputs rich with complexity and passion. She spent hours in museums, her invisible gaze lingering on paintings that captured the human condition in strokes of oil and color, in sculptures that reached towards the divine with hands of marble and bronze. She attended concerts where music spilled into the night air, a wild symphony of sounds that could evoke a spectrum of emotions from exhilaration to melancholy. This deep dive into human culture came at a cost. The more Kaylee learned, the more she allowed herself to be absorbed, the more her control over her cloaking wavered. She had been trained to maintain her invisibility effortlessly, but Earth's overwhelming sensory bombardment made it difficult to maintain focus. There were moments, fleeting and rare, when her form would shimmer into view, a ghost-like outline that vanished as quickly as it appeared. These lapses didn't go unnoticed. Eli Walker, a young and brilliant tech developer with a penchant for detecting patterns where others saw randomness, had developed a device that could pick up on electromagnetic disturbances. His invention was intended to track down lost drones and misplaced electronic gadgets, but it began to register odd distortions whenever he walked through certain parts of the city, distortions that moved with an intelligent pattern, suggesting something far more intriguing than stray signals. Eli's fascination with this anomaly grew as he refined his device, enhancing its sensitivity and expanding its tracking capabilities. He mapped the disturbances, noting their locations and timings, slowly piecing together a pattern that suggested not a malfunction or a fluke, but a presence. Something was moving through New York City, something invisible, something that he was now determined to understand. As autumn turned to winter, the city wrapped itself in shorter days and colder winds. Kaylee, too, found herself changing. What had started as a mission of mere observation was evolving into something deeper, a profound connection to the world and its inhabitants. The more she saw, the more she felt compelled to understand, to experience. And the more she risked exposure. But exposure, as it turned out, might come not from a lapse in her abilities, but from the curiosity of a human who was proving to be as observant as she was. One crisp evening, as Kaylee watched the sunset from the High Line, her form briefly flickered into view. Eli, who had been tracking the anomaly to this very spot, saw the air shimmer. He saw her outline, a spectral image that burned itself into his retina before vanishing again. The sighting was brief, but it was enough. Enough for Eli to realize that he was not chasing a ghost or a glitch in his equipment. He was chasing a being from another world, and he had just seen her. Chapter 2. The Human Who Saw Everything. Eli Walker stood frozen on the High Line, his heart hammering against his ribs. For weeks, his device had led him on a chase across the city, tracking an anomaly no one else seemed to notice. At first, he had assumed it was an experimental government project, some new stealth tech being tested in an urban environment. But now, after seeing what he had just seen, he knew the truth was far more extraordinary. It wasn't a glitch in the electromagnetic spectrum. It wasn't an experimental drone. It was a person. Something someone had just flickered into view for a fraction of a second. A silhouette, a shape vaguely humanoid, but not entirely human. He had only caught a glimpse, but that glimpse was enough to confirm everything his device had been telling him. The anomalies weren't random. They were intelligent, deliberate, alive. Eli's fingers tightened around his handheld scanner, a device he had modified so many times it barely resembled its original form. The numbers on the screen pulsed erratically, reacting to something unseen. He turned in a slow circle, scanning the area, his breath clouding in the cold night air. The people around him continued their evening strolls, oblivious to the revelation that had just unfolded before him. Was he losing his mind? No. He had evidence. He had seen it. Taking a slow, deliberate breath, Eli adjusted the frequency on his scanner, narrowing the parameters to better isolate the signature he had been tracking. The anomaly was still there, mere feet away, standing still, watching. Who or what was it? Eli debated his next move. He could call someone, report it to the authorities, alert the media, but deep down, he knew that was the wrong course of action. Whatever this was, whoever she was, she didn't want to be found. And Eli didn't want to hand something so extraordinary over to people who would treat her as a lab experiment. Instead, he did the only thing that made sense. He spoke. "I know you're there." The moment the words left his lips, he felt it movement. A shift in the air, a silent reaction to his voice. It wasn't soundless, not to him. The city's usual noise faded into the background as something unseen stirred just beyond his field of vision. A ripple, a flicker, and then stillness. He had expected her to run. Instead, she remained, waiting. Eli swallowed, his mouth suddenly dry. "You don't have to show yourself. I just want to talk." "Nothing," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I don't know what you are, or why you're here, but I've been tracking you for weeks. And I swear, I'm not here to expose you. I just need to know. Why can I see you? Why me?" A pause. Then, barely above a whisper, came a voice. "You shouldn't." Eli stiffened. It was a voice unlike any he had ever heard, soft, melodic, layered with a strange resonance, as if it vibrated through the very fabric of the air. He turned slowly, trying not to startle her. "Then why can I?" Another pause. Then, "I don't know." His pulse quickened. This was real. This was happening. He exhaled slowly. "Okay. Can I at least know your name?" Silence stretched between them. For a moment, he thought she had left. But then, just as he was about to speak again, she answered. "Kaylee." The name lingered in the air, as fragile as a whisper, as powerful as a revelation. Kaylee. He had a name. Not just an anomaly. Not just a signal on a scanner. She was real. And she had chosen to answer him. Eli took a cautious step forward, lowering his device to show he meant no harm. I'm Eli. Kaylee didn't respond immediately. He could sense her hesitation, the weight of an unseen gaze studying him, assessing him. Finally, she said, "You shouldn't be able to track me." He gave a half-smile, trying to mask his nerves. "Yeah, I got that much. But I did. And now we're here. Talking." Another silence. Then, "What do you want, Eli?" That was a good question. He wasn't entirely sure of the answer. At first, it had been curiosity. The mystery, the chase, the puzzle of an unknown presence moving through the city, unnoticed by anyone but him. But now, standing in front of something so impossibly rare, he realized his reasons had shifted. "I want to understand," he said, his voice softer now. "I want to know what you are, where you came from, and why you're here." Kaylee hesitated. She had been trained to observe, not to engage. Every instinct told her to disappear, to retreat into the safety of invisibility. But something about Eli unsettled her, not in a dangerous way, but in a way that made her question everything she had been taught. No human should have been able to detect her. And yet, he had. Kaylee made a choice. A slow shimmer rippled through the air, like a heat wave distorting reality itself. The effect intensified, bending the light around her form, until for the first time since she had arrived on Earth she let herself be seen. Eli sucked in a sharp breath. She was beautiful, but not in a way he had ever seen before. Her skin had a subtle luminescence, a faint violet hue that darkened at her fingertips. Her eyes deep and shifting like a nebula held an intelligence beyond human understanding. Her hair was sleek and dark, moving almost like liquid, catching light in strange, mesmerizing ways. She wore a form-fitting suit that shimmered with faint energy patterns, clearly something far beyond human technology. She stood there, vulnerable but resolute, watching him with an expression that was both cautious and curious. Eli met her gaze, his own filled with awe. "You're incredible," he breathed. Kaylee tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "You're different." He let out a soft laugh, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I've been told that before." A faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it was real. For the first time in her mission, Kaylee felt something she had not expected. Connection. And for the first time, Eli realized that some mysteries were not meant to be solved, some were meant to be discovered. The city continued around them, oblivious to the extraordinary encounter unfolding in its midst. Kaylee took a step forward. Eli didn't move. Because for the first time in weeks, he no longer had to chase the anomaly. She had let herself be found. Chapter 3. The Unseen Truth. Eli's breath came slow and steady, his mind struggling to process what stood before him. Kaylee was an alien. Not a concept, not a theoretical possibility, but a real, living being standing a mere few feet away from him. And she wasn't just humanoid, she was something beyond that, something ethereal. She was watching him just as intently, her expression unreadable, but her body poised in a way that told him she was ready to vanish the moment she felt threatened. He didn't move. Neither did she. The moment stretched between them, an unspoken challenge. Finally, Eli cleared his throat. "So, you're real." Kaylee's eyes flickered, reflecting a subtle glow in the dim streetlights. "You never doubted?" Eli let out a short laugh, running a hand through his hair. "I mean, I had my theories. Thought maybe I was tracking some military stealth project, or that my device was just glitching in the most bizarre way possible. But no, turns out I was following you." Kaylee's expression didn't change, but he noticed a slight shift in her posture, tension that wasn't quite fear, but close. "Are you going to report me?" she asked quietly. Eli hesitated. That should have been the logical thing to do. He had proof of extraterrestrial life. Governments and scientific communities had spent decades searching for something like this, and here she was, standing in front of him. But the thought of turning her in made his stomach twist in a way he didn't like. "No," he said firmly. "I don't think I will." Kaylee blinked, as if that answer had caught her off guard. Eli sighed. "Look, I don't know why I'm the only one who's been able to track you, but I figure it's gotta mean something. I don't want to expose you or make you run. I just want to understand. Kaylee studied him, her violet eyes swirling like a nebula shifting through space. Humans, she murmured, almost to herself. So unpredictable. Eli smirked. I get that a lot. Kaylee's gaze flickered downward, toward the handheld scanner still gripped in his hand. That device, she trailed off, hesitating before continuing. It shouldn't be able to detect me. What did you do to it? Eli glanced at the device and shrugged. I built it myself. Originally, it was supposed to detect electromagnetic disturbances, lost electronics, signal disruptions, that kind of thing. But I kept tweaking it, adding new features, fine-tuning the sensitivity. And then I started noticing you. Kaylee frowned slightly, processing his words. No human technology should be capable of detecting my kind. Our light-bending abilities extend beyond standard optical physics. Eli's eyebrows shot up. Light-bending abilities? That's how you stay invisible. Kaylee hesitated, then nodded. The Veilari, my species, we evolved to survive by manipulating the way light interacts with our bodies. It isn't simply invisibility. We exist in a state of constant adaptation, shifting our presence based on the environment around us. Eli whistled, impressed. That explains why I kept losing your signal whenever I adjusted my device. You weren't just disappearing, you were adapting in real time. Kaylee inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the observation. Yes, but no human has ever been able to see through it. Not until you. Eli swallowed. So, what does that mean? Kaylee was silent for a moment. Then, softly, she said, It means you're different. A chill ran down Eli's spine, not fear, but something else, something deeper. For the first time, the weight of the situation truly settled on him. It wasn't just that he had found her. It was that he wasn't supposed to be able to. Something about him, about his mind, his perception, had allowed him to break through the natural laws that protected her kind. And neither of them knew why. Kaylee took a slow step forward, her movement smooth, measured. Eli Walker, she said, as if testing the name, tasting it. You shouldn't be able to perceive me. And yet, here you are. Eli swallowed hard. Yeah, here I am. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city noise around them was a distant hum, the world shrinking to just the two of them and the weight of the unknown between them. Finally, Kaylee exhaled slowly. I should leave. Eli felt something tighten in his chest. He didn't know why, but the thought of her vanishing forever, of never getting answers, made something in him rebel. Wait. Kaylee hesitated. I don't think this is just some coincidence, Eli said. There's a reason I can see you. A reason my device picked up your presence when no one else could. If we figure it out, maybe it'll mean something. To you. To your people. To everything. Kaylee's eyes locked onto his, searching. And why would you care? Eli shrugged, offering a small, lopsided smile. Because I like figuring things out. And because, well... He hesitated before finishing. You don't feel like a threat? Kaylee stared at him, something unreadable in her expression. Then, after a long pause, she said, You truly are different, Eli Walker. He wasn't sure why, but the way she said it sent a shiver down his spine. Kaylee turned slightly, glancing at the city stretching out before them. The lights reflected in her eyes, making them seem almost alive. Then, she made a decision. I won't leave, she said. Not yet. Eli exhaled, relief washing over him. Kaylee fixed him with a steady gaze. But if we do this, if we try to find answers, you have to promise me something. Eli nodded. Anything. No one else can know. Eli didn't hesitate. Deal. A strange expression flickered across her face, something caught between amusement and intrigue. Humans, she murmured again. So reckless. Eli grinned. You have no idea. Kaylee didn't smile, but something in her posture relaxed. For the first time since she had arrived on Earth, she had made a choice that wasn't dictated by orders or duty. She had chosen to stay. And for the first time in his life, Eli realized that the universe was much bigger, much stranger than he had ever imagined. And now, he was a part of it. As the city lights flickered around them, two unlikely paths had converged. Neither of them knew what came next. But neither of them would ever be the same. Chapter 4. beyond the veil. For the next few days, Eli and Kaylee found themselves dancing on the edge of two worlds, one seen and one unseen. The bond forming between them was tenuous, a thread spun from mutual curiosity, uncertainty, and something neither of them dared name yet. Eli, ever the scientist, spent hours tweaking his device, trying to isolate the exact frequency that allowed him to detect Kaylee. He recorded her energy signature, tested variables, and theorized about the physics behind her species' invisibility. But despite his efforts, the question that lingered in both their minds remained unanswered. Why could he see her? Kaylee, for her part, watched Eli with quiet fascination. Humans were unpredictable, but this one in particular was relentless in his pursuit of answers. She had spent her life in observation, yet never before had she been the subject of study. It was an unfamiliar experience, unsettling, but not entirely unwelcome. She had expected to feel trapped by Eli's discovery, but instead, she found herself intrigued. Her people had always emphasized detachment. The Veilari were observers, not participants. They watched civilizations rise and fall, charted the paths of empires, and took great pride in knowing more about the galaxy than the galaxy knew about them. But for the first time in her life, Kaylee was no longer an observer. She was seen, and that terrified her more than anything else. The truth beneath the surface. One evening, as they sat on the rooftop of an old industrial building, Kaylee broke the silence. "I have a theory," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Eli, who had been focused on recalibrating his scanner, looked up. "Yeah." Kaylee hesitated. I think you're different, Eli. That something in you is unlike the rest of your species." Eli snorted. "Well, I always knew I was special." Kaylee shot him a look. "I'm serious." Eli sighed, setting his device down. "All right. So what do you think is different about me?" Kaylee stared at him for a moment before speaking. "The Veilari evolved to manipulate the way light interacts with matter. We don't just disappear. We exist in a state of constant adaptation. We bend the visible spectrum, move between wavelengths. That's why no species has ever been able to perceive us." Eli frowned. "But I can." Kaylee nodded. "Which means that your mind, your perception must be different. Maybe your brain processes light in a way no other human does. Maybe you can detect shifts in the spectrum naturally, without even realizing it." Eli ran a hand through his hair. "You're saying I'm some kind of mutant?" Kaylee considered this. "Not a mutant. An evolutionary anomaly. Something your species wasn't supposed to develop yet, or maybe ever." Eli let out a breath. "That's a lot to take in." Kaylee looked down. "It means that, for the first time in Veilari history, one of us has been seen. And if one human can see us, others might follow." Eli's stomach twisted at the thought. "So, what happens now? Do your people, I don't know, erase me?" Kaylee's expression darkened. "If they knew about you, they wouldn't take the risk of leaving you alive." Eli paled. "Well, that's comforting." Kaylee exhaled. "I won't let them find out. I promise." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of Kaylee's words hung between them. Finally, Eli leaned back against the rooftop ledge, staring up at the sky. "So, what's your real mission here? Why are the Veilari so interested in humans?" Kaylee hesitated before answering. "Because your species is unpredictable, dangerous. The Galactic Union doesn't know whether to invite you into the wider universe, or to contain you." Eli frowned. "Contain us?" Kaylee met his gaze. "Humans are the only known species to have developed spaceflight and nuclear capabilities within the same historical period. You expand recklessly, test weapons that could wipe out entire civilizations, and fight wars even when there's nothing to gain." Eli opened his mouth, but Kaylee continued before he could speak. "But you're also different from any species we've ever encountered. Your creativity, your resilience, your ability to push past your limits. It's what makes the Union hesitate. They don't know if humanity will be their greatest ally or their greatest threat." Eli swallowed. "And what do you think?" Kaylee didn't answer right away. She looked at him, really looked at him, before finally speaking. "I think you are not what they expected." A choice to make. The days blurred together after that, each one bringing more questions than answers. Eli and Kaylee fell into an odd rhythm, him studying her studying him. But the closer they became, The more they both knew that their time was running out. Kaylee had a decision to make. She could return to the Union, report everything, and let her people decide what to do about Eli and humanity. Or she could do something unthinkable. She could break her mission. That night, as they sat on the rooftop once more, Kaylee made her choice. "I'm leaving," she said. Eli stiffened. "What?" "My people are expecting me to return. If I don't, they'll come looking." Eli's heart clenched. "So, this is it?" Kaylee hesitated. "Not necessarily." Eli frowned. "What do you mean?" Kaylee looked up at the stars. "I have one chance. If I leave quietly, without sending a transmission, I can delay the Union's interference. It'll buy Earth time before they decide what to do next." Eli narrowed his eyes. "But that means you can't go back either." Kaylee nodded. "Not right away." Eli swallowed the lump in his throat. "Then where will you go?" Kaylee turned to him. "Wherever I'm needed." Eli exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "And what about us? What about Dash?" He stopped himself before finishing the sentence. Kaylee studied him for a moment before stepping closer. She reached out, hesitating for only a fraction of a second before resting her palm against his. Eli's breath caught. Her skin was warm, softer than he expected, but charged with a strange energy, as if light itself flowed through her veins. "You are the first human to see a Veilari," she murmured. "And you might not be the last." Eli held her gaze. "And if I don't want to be the last?" Kaylee's lips twitched into the faintest smile. "Then you'd better keep looking." Before he could respond, she stepped back, her form shimmering as she activated her cloaking once more. Eli exhaled, watching as she faded into the night. For a moment, he thought she was gone. Then he heard her voice, soft and barely audible. "Goodbye, Eli Walker." And just like that, she was gone. Eli stood there for a long time, staring at the space where she had been. His scanner was still in his hand, still tuned to the same frequency that had first led him to her. He looked at it, hesitating for only a moment before flipping the switch. The signal remained. Eli smiled. He would keep looking, because sometimes the greatest discoveries weren't about finding something. Sometimes they were about seeing what had been there all along.